Mister, your man makes my mom cry every day, why?
Mister, your men makes my mom cry every day, why? The second Maya's small, dark fingers curled around Kim Jai's pinstriped sleeve, the air in the Lotus Lounge didn't just grow cold, it vanished. The rhythmic click of counting machines and the low hum of illegal negotiations cut to a jagged, terrifying silence, as if the entire underworld had just held its breath. Her tiny hand, adorned with a plastic flower ring, looked impossibly fragile against the midnight black fabric of a suit that cost more than her mother's apartment. Yet, that single point of contact paralyzed 40 high-ranking syndicate members, their hands hovering over holstered pistols they were suddenly too afraid to draw. Across the mahogany table, a rival drug kingpin who had been shouting demands just seconds ago now sat frozen, his mouth agape, his eyes darting from the child's innocent face to Kim Jai's whiskey glass. He watched with a sick fascination, calculating how many seconds were left before the devil of Seoul decimated the only person in the city brave enough, or foolish enough, to touch him without permission. Hello, family, sit tight and listen, do not skip yet. Where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comment, so I can send you special regards for being part of this family. And also, hit the subscribe button on your screen to subscribe to this channel. Now let's go deep into this story. Kim Jai did not move at first. He simply stared down at the small hand anchored to his sleeve, his eyes as unreadable as a frozen lake. The smoke from the cigarette resting in the ashtray curled upward, snaking around Maya's pink hair ribbons like a gray ghost. Around them, the silence was so absolute it felt heavy, a physical pressure that made the lungs of every man in the room burn. Your men, Maya repeated, her voice a tiny, clear bell in the graveyard of the lounge. They make my mom cry. Why? The boss shifted. It was a slow, deliberate movement that sent a ripple of terror through his guards. He didn't pull away. Instead, he reached out with his free hand and picked up his glass of whiskey. He took a slow sip, his gaze finally lifting to look past the child, toward the glass-paneled entrance of the VIP suite. Outside, in the dimly lit hallway of the club, the reality of his business was on full display. Two of his enforcers, hulking men in leather jackets who looked like jagged shadows, had a woman pinned against the mahogany wainscoting. Tasha. Her hair was disheveled, her eyes wide and wet with the kind of terror that only a mother feels when she has lost sight of her child in a den of wolves. One of the men had his hand gripped tightly around her upper arm, his mouth twisted in a sneer as he hissed a threat about protection taxes and consequences. Kim Jai set the glass down. The sharp clack of crystal against wood sounded like a gunshot. Min-ho, Kim Jai said softly. His voice was a low, gravelly rasp that carried to the back of the room without effort. A tall man with a jagged scar across his nose stepped forward, bowing so low his forehead nearly touched the table. Yes, Chairman. The child asked me a question, Kim Jai said, tilting his head toward Maya, who still hadn't let go of his expensive wool suit. And I find that I do not have a satisfactory answer for her. Kim Jai stood up. He was a tall, imposing figure, his silhouette cutting a sharp, lethal line against the amber glow of the lounge's backlighting. He began to walk, his gait easy and predatory, with Maya still tethered to his side like a small, frilly anchor. He didn't force her to keep up. He adjusted his stride to hers. As they reached the heavy double doors, the two enforcers finally noticed the shift in the room. They froze, their faces draining of color as the chairman of the Iron Lotus stepped into the hallway. When they saw Maya holding his arm, the man holding Tasha immediately recoiled, his hands flying up as if he had been burned. Chairman, the enforcer stammered, his voice cracking. We were just collecting, she was being difficult. She hid the girl, we were just... Kim Jai stopped 3 feet from them. He looked at Tasha, whose breath was coming in ragged, shallow gasps. He saw the red finger marks blooming on her skin where his man had gripped her. Then he looked down at Maya. The girl's face was a mask of pure, heartbreaking trust. She truly believed that by bringing her grievance to the man at the top, justice would be served. You made her cry, Kim Jai said, his voice dropping to a dangerous, icy whisper. Boss, it's just the protocol, the second man pleaded, his knees beginning to shake. The neighborhood needs to know the price of. The protocol does not include making a child beg me for her mother's peace, Kim Jai interrupted. He turned his head slightly toward Min-ho, who had followed him out. These two have forgotten who we are. They think we are common thugs who prey on the weak to feel powerful. We are not thugs. We are the law." In a movement so fast the eye could barely track it, Kim Jai's hand shot out. He didn't strike Tasha's harasser. He grabbed the man's throat and slammed him back against the wall with enough force to crack the wood. The enforcer gasped, his feet dangling inches off the floor. "If I ever see you near this woman again," Kim Jai hissed into the man's ear, "I won't just take your job. I'll take the hands you used to touch her. Do you understand?" The man could only offer a choked, gurgling nod. Kim Jai dropped him like a piece of trash. He turned to the other man, who was already on his knees, head pressed to the floor in a desperate plea for mercy. "Get out," Kim Jai commanded. "Both of you, you are stripped of your colors. If you are seen in this district by sunrise, you will be dealt with." The two men scrambled away, disappearing into the shadows of the club's exit as if the devil himself were at their heels. The hallway fell silent again. Tasha slid down the wall, her strength finally failing her, and buried her face in her hands, sobbing with a mixture of relief and lingering horror. Maya finally let go of Kim Jai's sleeve and ran to her mother, throwing her small arms around Tasha's neck. "See, Mommy, I told him," Maya whispered loudly. "He fixed it." Kim Jai stood there, the rugged lines of his face softening for a fraction of a second as he watched the reunion. He reached into his breast pocket, pulled out a silk handkerchief, and stepped toward them. The guards behind him shifted, their rifles lowered but their eyes wide. They had never seen the Tiger of Soul intervene in a street-level debt, let alone for a stranger. He knelt down, a king descending from his throne, and held the handkerchief out to Tasha. "Your daughter has more courage than my entire board of directors," Kim Jai said, his eyes meeting Tasha's tear-streaked ones. Tasha looked at the handkerchief, then at the man whose name was whispered in fear throughout the city. She saw the whiskey on his breath and the steel in his gaze, but she also saw the way he looked at Maya, with a strange, haunting glimmer of something that looked like regret. "Thank you," Tasha managed to choke out, taking the silk with a trembling hand. "Do not thank me yet," Kim Jai said, standing back up and smoothing the wrinkles in his suit where Maya's tiny grip had been. He looked down the hall at the world he built on blood and bone, then back at the little girl in the frilly pink dress. "The streets are no longer safe for you. My men will remember your faces, and my enemies will too." He turned to Minho. "Clear the west wing of the estate. Prepare the car. They are coming with us." Tasha's heart leapt into her throat. "What? No, we can't." "It wasn't a request," Kim Jai said, his voice returning to its granite-hard authority. He looked at Maya and offered a ghost of a smile, the first one his men had seen in years. "You asked me why my men make your mother cry. I have removed them. Now I will make sure no one else ever tries." The transition from the neon-slicked streets to the iron-wrought gates of Kim Jai's private estate felt like crossing into another dimension. The sleek black sedan glided through the sprawling grounds of the Dragon's Nest, a fortress of glass and stone perched high above the city, where the air smelled of pine needles and expensive security instead of exhaust and desperation. Tasha sat in the back seat, her body stiff, clutching Maya so tightly the girl's pink ribbons were beginning to fray. She watched the high-tech security cameras swivel to track their movement, their red lenses blinking like the eyes of predatory birds. To the world, this was a palace. To Tasha, it was a golden cage where the locks were controlled by a man who had just dismantled 2 of his own soldiers without breaking a sweat. "Is this the castle?" Maya whispered, her forehead pressed against the tinted glass. "It's a house, baby," Tasha murmured, though her voice lacked conviction. The car pulled into a heated underground garage lined with armored SUVs and luxury vehicles. Kim Jai was already standing there, having arrived in the lead car. He stood with his hands clasped behind his back, his silhouette framed by the harsh overhead LED lights. As the door was opened for them by a silent, white-gloved driver, the sheer scale of his world began to sink in. "The West Wing is self-contained," Kim Jai said, his voice echoing slightly in the sterile garage. He didn't wait for them to exit. He turned and began walking toward a private elevator. "You will find clothes, food, and a physician to look after those bruises on your arm. My staff has been briefed. You are guests, but for your own safety, you are not to leave the perimeter without an escort." "Guests or prisoners?" Tasha asked, her voice cracking as she finally stepped out of the car. Kim Jai paused, the elevator doors sliding open with a soft hiss. He turned his head just enough to catch her eye. In my world, Tasha, there is very little difference. One provides comfort, the other provides walls. I am offering you both so that I don't have to explain to your daughter why I failed to keep my word. The elevator whisked them upward to a floor that felt more like a five-star hotel than a home. The suite was an explosion of minimalist luxury, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the sprawling sprawl of Seoul, silk sheets, and a kitchen stocked with things Tasha hadn't seen in years. But as the elevator doors closed and the soft click of a remote electronic lock engaged, the reality hit her. She walked to the window, looking down at the jagged peaks of the mountains surrounding the estate. She was safe from the debt collectors, safe from the street thugs, and safe from the crushing weight of poverty. But she was now under the shadow of a man who commanded an army of ghosts. Maya, oblivious to the invisible bars, bounced onto the massive velvet sofa. "Mommy, look, the TV is the size of the wall." Tasha didn't respond. She was watching the reflection in the glass. Far below in the courtyard, she could see Kim Jae standing alone, a small orange ember of a cigarette glowing in the dark. He looked less like a king and more like a sentry, guarding the only piece of innocence left in his world. She realized then that they weren't just being protected, they were being kept. Kim Jae had seen something in Maya's touch that he couldn't let go of, and Tasha feared what a man who had everything would do to keep the one thing he didn't deserve. The days that followed were a strange ballet of routine and revelation within the gilded cage of Kim Jae's estate. For Tasha, it was a constant battle between gratitude and terror. Every meal delivered by a silent, bowing servant, every immaculate room, every expensive toy Maya received felt like another link in a chain. She watched Kim Jae's men, the hardened bodyguards who patrolled the halls with the silent efficiency of predators, their eyes constantly scanning, their hands always near their weapons. They were monsters to her, but to Maya, they were just very tall, very serious men who played make-believe. It started subtly. Maya, with the boundless curiosity of a child, began to explore. One afternoon, Tasha found her in the main living area, a vast space that felt more like a museum. Maya wasn't admiring the priceless art. She was trying to teach a hulking guard named Jihan, who had a face like carved stone, how to hold her sparkly unicorn doll. "No, Jihanappa," Maya instructed, adjusting his massive hand. "You have to hold her gently like this. She's scared of the bad guys." Jihan, who had likely never held anything softer than a combat knife, looked utterly bewildered. His fingers, scarred and calloused, gingerly wrapped around the doll's plastic body. A flicker of something embarrassment, amusement, crossed his impassive face before he quickly resumed his stoic guard. Tasha watched from the doorway, a knot of conflicting emotions tightening in her stomach. Her daughter was dismantling a soldier, one pink ribbon at a time. Over the next few days, the fortress began to warp around Maya's innocent presence. The guards found themselves in awkward situations. Private conversations about syndicate business would suddenly be interrupted by Maya asking if they wanted to see her latest drawing of a rainbow. The sterile, silent dining room would occasionally erupt with Maya's giggles as she convinced a bodyguard to make airplane noises with her spoon. They tolerated it at first, then awkwardly participated, and eventually, Tasha saw a few of them exchange faint, almost imperceptible smiles when Maya wasn't looking. The Iron Lotus, notorious for its brutality, was slowly being infiltrated by glitter and cartoons. One evening, Tasha was walking past Kim Jae's study, a room usually shrouded in silence and the scent of expensive tobacco. The door was ajar, and she heard a sound that made her freeze. It was the distinct, high-pitched wail of a cartoon character. Peeking inside, she saw Kim Jae, the man who commanded an empire of fear, sitting in his opulent leather chair, a whiskey glass untouched on his desk. On the giant screen usually reserved for surveillance feeds and financial reports, a brightly colored animated show played, its saccharine theme song filling the usually solemn room. Maya was perched on the armrest of his chair, her head tilted back, gazing up at him with unshakable trust. She was explaining the plot of the cartoon with serious, dramatic gestures. Kim Jae wasn't looking at the screen. He was looking at Maya, a faint, almost imperceptible softening around his eyes. He listened intently as she recounted the heroic deeds of a cartoon squirrel. And then, Maya concluded, her small finger pointing at his sharply pressed lapel, The bad guy tried to steal all the nuts, but Squirrel Hero saved them. You're like Squirrel Hero, Chairman Kim Jai. You saved Mommy and me from the bad guys. A muscle in Kim Jai's jaw twitched. He picked up his whiskey glass, swirling the amber liquid, but didn't drink. Is that so, Maya? Uh-huh, she nodded emphatically. You're a good bad guy. Tasha, hidden in the shadows of the hallway, felt a shiver run down her spine. A good bad guy. The simple, innocent logic of a child perfectly encapsulated the terrifying paradox of their situation. Kim Jai had saved them, yes, but he was still the same man, the one whose power had created the bad guys in the first place. He was dangerous, ruthless, and utterly out of her league. Yet, looking at him now, watching a silly cartoon with a child who saw him as a hero, Tasha couldn't deny the flicker of something else. Something human, something almost gentle. She slipped away before either of them noticed her, leaving Kim Jai in his study, unknowingly watching cartoons and being redefined by a little girl in a frilly pink dress. The golden cage was slowly changing, not just for them, but for the tiger who owned it. The curiosity that had kept Tasha awake at night finally drove her to wander. While Maya was occupied with Jihan and a set of watercolor paints in the sunroom, Tasha found herself in a restricted corridor of the East Wing. The air here felt different, colder, heavier with the scent of cedar and old paper. At the end of the hall sat a heavy oak door, slightly ajar. Unlike the rest of the house, which pulsed with high-tech security and modern glass, this room felt like a tomb. Tasha pushed it open. It wasn't a bedroom, it was a memorial. The walls were lined with black and white photographs, but one in particular, centered on a small altar, drew her in. It was a younger Kim Jai, hardly more than a boy, standing next to a woman who looked like a softer, kinder version of him and a little girl who couldn't have been more than 5. The girl was wearing a hanbok, her dark hair tied with a silk ribbon. Her name was Jaya. Tasha spun around, her heart hammering against her ribs. Kim Jai stood in the doorway, his silhouette blocking the light from the hall. He wasn't angry, he looked exhausted, his sharp features blurred by the shadows of the room. I didn't mean to, Tasha began, but he silenced her with a slow wave of his hand. He walked into the room, his footsteps silent on the polished wood. He stood before the photograph, his gaze fixed on the little girl in the frame. She was my world, my sister. My family was not born into the syndicate, Tasha. We were collateral. My father owed money to men who didn't believe in mercy. They came for him, but they took her instead to make a point. The silence in the room was suffocating. Tasha looked at the rugged man beside her, seeing for the first time the hollowed-out shell of the boy who had watched his world burn. I spent 10 years hunting every man involved, Kim Jai said, his voice a flat, dead monotone. I climbed over their bodies to take this seat so that no one could ever take anything from me again. I turned myself into a monster to ensure I would never be the victim. But in doing so, I became the very thing that broke my mother's heart. He turned to look at Tasha, and for a fleeting second, the tiger of soul vanished. In his eyes was a raw, agonizing vulnerability. When Maya took my hand in that club, she didn't see the boss. She saw the man I was supposed to be. She looks at me with the same trust Jaya once did, and it is a ghost I do not know how to live with. Tasha reached out, her hand hovering near his arm before she pulled back. The fear was still there, but it was being eclipsed by a profound, aching pity. He wasn't just her captor. He was a man trapped in a prison of his own making, built out of grief and blood. She doesn't see a ghost, Kim Jai, Tasha said softly. She sees you, and she thinks you're a hero. That's a heavy weight for a monster to carry. Kim Jai looked at her, his jaw tightening. For a moment, the distance between them, the culture, the crime, the power, seemed to vanish. They were just two parents standing in the wreckage of a past that refused to stay buried. Perhaps, he whispered, but the world does not allow monsters to retire, Tasha. My past is coming for us. It always does. The following night, a storm rolled in over the Han River, lashing the glass walls of the estate with a rhythmic, violent fury. The power flickered, plunging the West Wing into a soft, amber emergency glow. Maya, exhausted from a day of training the guards to play hide-and-seek, was fast asleep, her small chest rising and falling in a rhythmic piece that felt defiant against the chaos outside. Tasha couldn't sleep. The revelations in the memorial room had peeled back a layer of her fear, leaving something raw and electric in its place. She wandered into the small private terrace kitchen to find Kim Jai standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows. He had discarded his suit jacket and tie. His white shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms corded with muscle and faint, silver scars. "The storm is restless tonight," he said, not turning around. He held a crystal tumbler of amber liquid, the ice clinking softly as he swirled it. "I think the house is just too quiet," Tasha replied, stepping closer. "In our old neighborhood, silence usually meant something bad was about to happen. I'm still learning that here. Silence is just silence." Kim Jai turned then. The dim emergency lights cast deep shadows across the planes of his face, making him look less like a legend and more like a man. "Silence is a luxury I paid for with peace of mind, but you're right. It can be deafening." He looked at her then, really looked at her. Tasha was wearing a simple silk robe the staff had provided, her hair loose and soft around her face. The sharp contrast of her deep skin against the pale, opulent backdrop of his home had always struck him, but tonight it felt intimate rather than intrusive. "Why did you really bring us here?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper over the rain. "It wasn't just the promise to Maya. You could have sent us to a hotel in another city. You could have just given us money." Kim Jai set his glass down on the marble counter. He took a step toward her, closing the distance until she could smell the faint scent of sandalwood and expensive tobacco that clung to him. "Because for the first time in 20 years, someone looked at me and didn't see a paycheck or a death sentence. Maya looked at me and saw a man who could fix the world. And you." He paused, his hand hovering in the air between them before his fingers grazed the side of her jaw. His touch was unexpectedly warm, his thumb brushing against her skin with a tenderness that made Tasha's breath hitch. "You look at me and see exactly what I am," he finished, his voice dropping to a low, vibrating rumble. "And you stayed anyway." Tasha didn't pull away. The air between them hummed with a sudden, heavy tension, a pull that had nothing to do with debts or protection. It was the spark of two lonely souls recognizing a shared burden. She saw the predator, yes, but she also saw the protector, the grieving brother, and the man who wanted to be better for a child who didn't know any better. "I stayed for Maya," Tasha whispered, though her eyes betrayed her. "But I'm standing here for me." Kim Jai leaned in, his forehead nearly touching hers. The world outside, the syndicates, the blood, the iron-wrought gates, seemed to vanish. In this pocket of amber light, there was only the heat of his breath and the steady, frantic beat of her own heart. The moment was broken by the sharp, electronic chirp of his encrypted phone on the counter. The screen glowed bright blue, a signal from the perimeter guards. The tiger snapped back instantly, his hand dropped, and his eyes hardened into flint. The spark was still there, flickering in the background, but the boss had returned. "Stay in the suite," he commanded, his voice cold and professional once more. "The silence is over." The shift in Kim Jai was instantaneous. The man who had touched Tasha's jaw with such heartbreaking tenderness was gone, replaced by a stone-cold commander whose every instinct was now tuned to the frequency of war. He didn't look back as he grabbed his discarded jacket, leaving Tasha standing in the fatting heat of their shared moment. Downstairs, the atmosphere in the tactical command center was thick with the scent of ozone and cold coffee. Screens that usually displayed serene views of the estate were now flickering with infrared heat signatures moving through the tree line. "Report," Kim Jai barked as he stepped into the room. Min Ho, his most trusted lieutenant, stood over a digital map of the perimeter. "3 breach points, Chairman. They're using high-frequency jammers. These aren't just street thugs. This is precision work." Kim Jai leaned over the table, his eyes narrowing at the patterns of the red dots. "The black dogs," he muttered, referring to a splinter cell of his own syndicate that had grown restless under his recent distractions. "They aren't here to negotiate. They're here to prove I've grown soft." "There's more, sir," Min Ho said, his voice dropping an octave. He hesitated, then swiped a file onto the main screen. It was a series of high-resolution photos taken over the last 48 hours. Kim Jai holding Maya's doll, Tasha standing on the balcony, and most damningly, the moment in the study where Kim Jai had been watching cartoons. The room went silent. To the men in this world, those images weren't heartwarming. They were evidence of a terminal illness. A boss with a heart was a boss who could be killed. The leak came from inside, Minho whispered. Someone on the inner circle thinks the Iron Lotus needs a leader who doesn't play house with outsiders. Kim Jai didn't flinch, but his grip tightened on the edge of the mahogany table until the wood groaned. He realized now that his mercy hadn't just put a target on his back, it had painted one on Tasha and Maya. His rivals weren't just coming for his throne, they were coming to purge the weakness he had brought into the nest. Above them, in the West Wing, Tasha heard the distant, muffled thump of a flashbang grenade, followed by the frantic barking of the estate's guard dogs. She ran to Maya's room, scooped the sleeping child into her arms, and backed into the corner of the nursery. The frilly pink dresses in the closet and the sparkly toys on the floor suddenly looked like neon signs screaming for the killers to find them. A shadow crossed the hallway outside their door. Tasha grabbed a heavy glass award from the nightstand, her knuckles white. She expected the door to burst open with gunfire. Instead, she heard the low, rhythmic chime of the private elevator. Kim Jai stepped into the room, his white shirt now stained with a fresh spray of blood across the shoulder. He didn't say a word. He walked to the hidden wall panel behind the bookshelf, his fingers flying across a biometric scanner. A heavy steel door hissed open, revealing a cramped, high-tech escape shaft. "Go," he commanded, his eyes meeting Tasha's. The romantic spark from an hour ago was buried under layers of lethal intent. "Minho is waiting at the bottom. He will take you to the sub-level harbor. Do not stop. Do not look back." "What about you?" Tasha asked, her voice trembling as Maya stirred in her arms. Kim Jai pulled a sleek, matte black handgun from his holster and checked the chamber with a practiced, metallic click. He looked at the child who had dared to hold his hand and ask him why. "I have to show them why I am the one who sits in the chair," he said. "And I have to make sure that the next time someone makes your mother cry, it's the last thing they ever do." As the secret door began to close, Tasha saw Kim Jai turn toward the main entrance of the suite, his silhouette framed by the flashing red emergency lights, a lone tiger preparing to face the pack. The escape shaft was a narrow, claustrophobic vein of cold steel that hummed with the vibration of distant explosions. Tasha felt the floor drop beneath them, a silent plummet into the belly of the estate. Maya was awake now, her large eyes reflecting the pulsing red emergency lights of the elevator. She didn't cry. She simply buried her face in Tasha's neck, clutching her mother's shirt with the same desperate grip she had once used on Kim Jai's sleeve. The doors hissed open at the sub-level harbor, a cavernous, concrete vault where the black river water lapped against a private pier. A sleek, armored speedboat sat idling, its engines a low, menacing growl. Minho stood by the boarding plank, but he wasn't alone. 3 other guards stood with him, their rifles leveled not at the darkness of the tunnels, but at the elevator. "Minho," Tasha whispered, stepping out cautiously. "The chairman said you would take us." Minho didn't look at her. His eyes were fixed on the elevator display, watching the numbers climb back up to the penthouse where Kim Jai was fighting alone. "The chairman is a dead man walking, Tasha," Minho said, his voice devoid of its usual loyalty. "He traded the strength of the Iron Lotus for a child's smile. The board doesn't want a father. They want a king." Tasha froze. The betrayal wasn't coming from the outside. It was the man Kim Jai trusted most. "He's upstairs protecting us, protecting you." "He's protecting a weakness," Minho snapped, finally looking at her. There was no hatred in his eyes, only a cold, calculated pragmatism. "I'm not going to kill you. That would be messy. I'm going to deliver you to the Black Dogs. Once they have you, Kim Jai will surrender. It's the only way to save the syndicate from his sentimentality." As the guards moved forward to seize her, a sudden, violent realization washed over Tasha. For weeks, she had been a passive observer in this world of violence, a guest waiting to be saved. But as she looked at Maya's terrified face, the extreme self-reliance that had kept her alive in the slums flared into a white-hot rage. She wasn't a mafia boss, and she wasn't a soldier. She was a mother. "No," Tasha breathed. As the first guard reached for Maya, Tasha didn't scream. She used the weight of her own body, swinging the heavy glass award she had carried from the suite with everything she had. It shattered against the guard's temple, sending him reeling. In the heartbeat of confusion that followed, she didn't run for the boat. She ran for the shadows of the heavy machinery lining the harbor. "Grab her," Minho roared. Tasha scrambled behind a wall of shipping crates, her heart thundering. She knew these tunnels. She had studied the emergency maps in her room while Kim Jai thought she was sleeping. She knew there was a manual release for the harbor's floodgates. She navigated the dark with a predator's instinct, shielding Maya's head as they ducked under steaming pipes. She found the rusted iron lever. With a primal scream of effort, she threw her weight against it. The sound of grinding gears drowned out the guards shouting. Above them, the massive sea doors began to groan open, allowing a surge of the dark, freezing Han River to rush into the chamber. The sudden turbulence tossed the idling speedboat against the pier like a toy. "Tasha!" Minho's voice echoed through the vault, tinged with genuine surprise. She didn't answer. She found the secondary emergency skiff, a small, unassuming inflatable, and lowered it into the churning water. She wasn't waiting for a hero anymore. She was becoming the one her daughter needed. As she pushed off into the dark, swirling current of the river, she looked back at the glowing towers of the estate. Gunfire sparked like fireflies in the penthouse windows. Kim Jai was still up there, fighting his own ghosts, while she was finally stepping out of his shadow and into the storm. Upstairs in the penthouse, the air was thick with the scent of spent gunpowder and ozone. Kim Jai stood behind the overturned mahogany desk, his chest heaving. Blood, some his, most not darkened the sleeve of his pinstriped suit. He had neutralized the first wave of assassins, but the silence that followed wasn't the silence of victory. It was the silence of a vacuum. His radio crackled. It wasn't the voice of his perimeter team. It was the cold, hollow tone of Minho. "She's gone, Chairman. Tasha sank the harbor's primary transport and took the skiff. She's in the river." There was a pause, a jagged edge of respect cutting through Minho's betrayal. "She's a fighter, but the black dogs are already downstream. They'll pick her up before she hits the city limits. It's over, Jai. Give up the seat and I'll make sure the girl lives." Kim Jai didn't respond. He dropped the radio, the plastic shattering against the marble floor. A cold, terrifying calm settled over him, the kind of stillness that preceded a typhoon. He had spent his whole life building walls to protect himself from loss, only to realize that the people he loved were now outside those walls, and his own family had locked the gate. He didn't call for backup. He didn't look for a tactical advantage. He walked to the private armory concealed behind his desk and pulled out a long, heavy case. Inside lay a customized tactical rifle and a pair of traditional short swords, the claws of the tiger that he hadn't touched since he took the throne. He didn't use the stairs or the elevator. He stepped out onto the shattered balcony, the rain lashing his face, and hooked a high-speed descender to the railing. He dropped into the dark like a stone falling from heaven. The one-man mission wasn't just about survival. It was an act of purification. As he hit the ground, he moved through his own estate like a vengeful ghost. He bypassed the main gates, heading straight for the riverbank where a hidden motorcycle was stashed for emergencies. The engine roared to life, a mechanical scream that tore through the sound of the storm. He didn't care about stealth anymore. He wanted them to hear him coming. He wanted the black dogs, and Minho, to know that they hadn't just awakened a boss. They had awakened a father who had already lost one sister and would burn the world before he lost another daughter. He raced along the jagged river road, the bike leaning precariously at every turn. In the distance, through the curtain of rain, he saw the flickering lights of the Black Dog's interceptor boats closing in on a small, bobbing inflatable. Kim Jai pulled a thermal detonator from his belt. He didn't slow down as he reached the bridge overlooking the intercept point. He launched the bike off the embankment, bailing out in midair as the vehicle plummeted toward the lead interceptor boat like a guided missile. The resulting explosion lit up the Han River in a brilliant, terrifying orange. Kim Jai hit the water and surfaced instantly, his eyes fixed on the skiff. He saw Tasha standing at the stern, an oar in her hand, looking like a warrior queen from a forgotten age, shielding Maya with her own body. He climbed onto the wreckage of the burning interceptor, the fire reflecting in his eyes. The Black Dog soldiers scrambled to aim their weapons, but they were too slow. Kim Jai moved with a lethal, fluid grace, his short swords singing through the air. He wasn't just fighting, he was erasing them. By the time he reached the side of Tasha's skiff, the water around them was stained dark. He reached out a hand, the same hand Maya had held in the club. "I told you," Kim Jai rasped, his voice raw and bleeding. "I would make sure no one else ever tries." Tasha looked at him, seeing the blood, the fire, and the absolute ruin of his empire. But she also saw the man who had jumped into the abyss to find them. She took his hand, pulling him into the small boat. "We have to go," she said, her voice steady. "Minho will be coming with the rest." "Let him come," Kim Jai said, pulling them both close as the current swept them toward the city lights. "The Iron Lotus is dead, but we are still breathing." The neon skyline of Seoul faded into a blur of gray and blue as the small boat drifted into the early morning mist of the lower Han River. The storm had spent its fury, leaving behind a world that felt scrubbed clean and terrifyingly quiet. Kim Jai sat at the stern, his ruined pinstripe jacket discarded. He had used a strip of his own silk shirt to bandage a deep graze on his shoulder, but his hands, the hands that had held the fate of a city, were steady as he steered them toward a nondescript fishing pier in a district far beyond his own territory. They met a contact in the shadows of a rusted warehouse, not a syndicate soldier, but a man who specialized in making people disappear. Documents were exchanged. 3 passports, 3 new names, and the keys to a life that didn't involve blood or protection fees. "The Iron Lotus will tear itself apart trying to fill the vacuum you left," the man whispered, looking at Kim Jai with a mix of awe and pity. "You're leaving billions on the table, Jai." "I'm not leaving anything I want to keep," Kim Jai replied. 6 months later, the air was different. It didn't smell of gunpowder or expensive whiskey. It smelled of salt and wild jasmine. In a small, sun-drenched coastal town thousands of miles from the violence of the Iron Lotus, a bell chimed over the door of a modest bookstore and cafe. Tasha walked behind the counter, her movements fluid and free of the haunting tension that had once defined her. She no longer looked over her shoulder. She no longer calculated the exit routes in every room. In the back corner, tucked away in a reading nook filled with oversized pillows, Maya was busy reading a picture book to her most attentive student. Kim Jai sat on a low stool that was far too small for him, wearing a simple linen shirt and a pair of glasses. He wasn't the tiger of Seoul here. He was just a man who knew every character in Maya's favorite series and who never missed a tea party. As Tasha brought over 2 cups of coffee, Kim Jai looked up. The hard, icy plains of his face had been weathered by the sun and softened by peace. The tiger hadn't been tamed. He had simply found something worth guarding more than a throne. Maya looked up and beamed, grabbing Kim Jai's hand and placing it on the page of her book. "Look, Mommy, the hero stayed." Kim Jai's fingers, once used to sign death warrants, gently traced the colorful illustrations. He looked at Tasha, a silent communication passing between them, an acknowledgement of the blood shed to get here and the sanctuary they had built from the wreckage. "The debt is paid," Kim Jai said softly, his voice finally clear of the gravelly weight of the underworld. "More than paid," Tasha replied, resting her hand on his shoulder. Outside, the waves lapped gently against the shore, a rhythmic, peaceful sound that replaced the silence of the golden cage. The Korean Mafia boss had lost an empire, and a struggling mother had lost her fear. But as Maya laughed, pulling them both into her small, innocent world, they realized they had gained the only thing that actually mattered. A family that didn't have to ask why. The end. If you love this story, kindly click on the subscribe button to subscribe to this channel and stay tuned.